Welcome back to Rise to Liberty. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are joined by literally Spike Cohen. How you doing tonight, Spike?
I'm doing good, Jacob. Thanks for having me on, man.
Anytime. I always enjoy the conversations we have. So this was natural. Plus, I had realized the first conversation we had actually right when not too long after I started Rise to Liberty. We had talked about vaccine mandates. It was right when
Yes.
Biden came out and started talking about all of that, and it got swiped off of YouTube almost immediately. And so I figured it was about time to get you back on.
Well, because we said a bunch of unfounded conspiracies,
Yes.
otherwise known as things that are all settled, established facts that no one disputes anymore.
Yes, exactly. And that just upset some people for some reason. And
Not good. Not
exactly.
good. Stop saying things that are true and inconvenient to the people in charge.
Well, exactly. Otherwise, they can't do all these terrible things. You know.
Exactly.
So, speaking of which, have you been following any of the Twitter file stuff?
Oh yeah. In fact, I'm the guy who's been taking the Twitter files, screenshotting them, and then putting them on all the other social media just in case anyone is missing out on them. The newest one I haven't dived into yet, the one that came out earlier today. My understanding is that it's about the fact that Twitter was telling the government and other corporate media outlets, this isn't Russian bots. Please stop saying that we're allowing Russian bots on. I assume, again, I haven't finished reading it. I assume that at some point they just went, okay, fine, it's Russian bots, and just did whatever the government and corporate media told them to do.
So, why do you think this isn't bigger news? I mean, it's basically come out that Twitter has not been a private company like everyone
Yes.
said.
Yep.
It's absolutely 100% confirmed, and it's just like crickets for the most part.
Well, the question is, why is the corporate media not covering the fact, corporate media and other big tech outside of Twitter, covering the fact that corporate media and Twitter and big tech have been working hand in hand and basically at the behest of the government? Why on earth would they not want that to be a big story? The question answers itself. If they why would they want people to know that? And the fact is, it goes deeper than that. It's because they're still doing it, obviously. Like, it's because they can't. Look at what's happening right now with Joe Biden. Apparently has been holding classified information for years, and probably because he's forgetting it. And now I'm hearing that there's potentially a Chinese funded think tank that that he was a part of and getting paid to do next to nothing for. The media is almost entirely crickets on this, because they're supposed to be crickets on this, because they are not here to provide us with information that is newsworthy and that makes us better informed, citizens of this country or of this society. It's they give us information to propagandize us into accepting our lot as serfs for the controllers of the existing power structure. And so anything that makes us go, hey, wait a minute, I'm starting to think that these people don't have our best interest in mind. They're not going to do that. They can frame it against a certain political party or against a certain politician, then maybe. So that's why, like, right now, Fox News is all over this thing with Biden, and will probably make it sound like it's an even bigger deal than it really is, which will be hard because it's a pretty big deal. Whereas, anything related to Donald Trump, Fox, pretends that doesn't exist, and the major media pretends it's the biggest deal on earth. And this is what happens. And what we've seen is that social media, they basically cut out the middleman, and it's just the government telling them what to do. And that's horrifying. That makes social media potentially worse than the mainstream corporate media. There's not even a buffer there. It's just literally the government saying, this is bad, don't allow this.
Well, and it kind of makes it fairly obvious that all opinions are now ran through just the propaganda machine.
Yep.
Any dissenting opinion or anybody just raising questions saying, hey, wait a minute, they're just silenced or banned or just kicked off. And then you never
Yep.
even
Yep.
see any dissenting opinion.
Yeah, and the new thing that they're doing is they just take you and just on the algorithm. Like they just destroy so that it's not they're not banning you, so you can't have people saying free this person, let them back on. They're for the most part they're just putting you in oblivion and making it where you can't. One of the ways that I've been getting around that is it's hard for a bot to spot what I'm doing for the most part. I'll put out hot takes about Biden or Trump or COVID vaccines or whatever, but most of my stories are these like heart tugging emotional stories with paragraphs about it, and buried in it is about how, this is happening because there's too much power in the hands of too few people. That's harder for a bot to spot. It looks like just a human interest piece, and that they like that stuff. They like stuff that gets people happy or sad or excited or angry or whatever, as long as they think it's like a Humans of New York or Upworthy type of thing. And I make the stuff that I post sound just Upworthy enough, or just Humans of New Yorky enough, that I usually get away with it. It usually goes viral. Every once in a while they'll pop me, and I'll notice that this post that usually would be getting a reach of 3 or 4 million is getting a reach of 30 or 40,000. And it's like, yeah, I know why that is. It's because, I use one too many keywords that the bots picked up. So, or someone looked at it manually and went, nope, we don't want people to know about the, children being sent to Texas to mental hospital prisons because the Alaskan state system is so corrupt, and they're getting back end pay. They're getting a payoff from the private companies in Texas to imprison children with mental health problems. That we don't want people knowing about that. So anyway, no, but you find your ways to work around it. But the reality is, unfortunately, Elon Musk was able to buy Twitter, but that's a unicorn, like a multi-billionaire sinking basically his life savings into buying, and then some, having to sell shares of other companies to be able to buy it, and then exposing it to the world. There's no one wealthy enough to buy Facebook or Google. And if they were, it's not likely that they would say, hey, I'm going to go threaten everything by telling everyone what's happening. So this is really like a big moment. It's why the media is pretending it doesn't exist.
So, what's your overall opinion about Elon Musk? I know some people,
Yeah.
think this is like in general, a psyop or something, but it seems pretty unique that a billionaire would say, we're actually underpopulated as far as the planet goes. Like we should be having more kids, and
Yep.
you know, standing up for freedom of speech. That's pretty unique amongst the billionaires.
Oh, absolutely. I will say Elon Musk is just an example of the duality of man, right? Like, here is someone who has described himself as a free speech absolutist, and Twitter has definitely become a more friendly place for free speech. But then, like, he didn't like Kanye's tweet with the Aurelian symbol, the whatever symbol, which is it looks like a swastika and a Star of David. It turns out it's some like fringe religious thing, and that made him mad. So he has perma banned Kanye. And whatever you think of Conway, I don't like pretty much anything of what Kanye said in the last few weeks, but or I guess a couple of months now. But that wasn't very free speechy of him. Here's someone who has talked, one of the most prominent people to suggest peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, and yet he's giving Starlink for free to Ukraine civilians and military. It's actually, I believe, working with Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Defense on that, making that permanent. So, here's someone he's talked a lot about the free market, and yet he's gotten his tax carve outs and tax credits for his vehicles and things like that. So I mean, it's I'm not going to pretend Elon Musk is a perfect person, and I'm not going to pretend that he's evil either. Is he a psyop? I don't think he's a psyop. I think he's a man who's become incredibly wealthy by making some big power moves. I think he has a large overarching vision for the future. Everything from the fact that he's looking at. I see someone who looks at humanity almost in an imagination level. Like he's thinking about us becoming a star-faring species and extending our lives to the horizon indefinitely so that we don't really die anymore, at least we don't age anymore, and eventually merging us with, you know, cybernetic technology. Like, I mean, he's on a different level, which is why a lot of the stuff that he, you know, the ideas he puts out sound like insanity. But then so did at one point, so did the idea of the largest and most profitable car maker selling zero gas internal combustion vehicles. And he's doing that. So did the idea of having rockets that, you know, come back down to Earth and things like that. And in a relatively short period of time, he's achieved those things. So I think it's a net positive that Elon is around. But we have to call balls and strikes. If, you know, I don't think he'd even claim he's perfect or anything close to it. And when he's falling short of his standards, especially when it comes to Twitter, I mean, he can run his company however he wants. But when he's saying, you know, this is about free speech, we got to call him on it. You know, if it looks like he's not keeping up with that, we need to remind him of that.
Well, I would say in general, even just the Twitter files, that's worth it to me.
That's huge.
It's really nice to have you know, a lot of suspicions that tons of people have had actually confirmed.
Yep. Yep. We got bits and pieces of, like, I remember, I think this was last year where maybe it was the year before. I can't remember now, but it was at least a year ago when both Jen Psaki and Joe Biden came out and were like, and for those who know, Jen Psaki was Joe Biden's last press secretary. And they both came out like same day, basically saying, if Facebook doesn't start, you know, banning people for being vaccine hesitant, then they're killing people and they're going to be responsible for the deaths, and there's going to be some hell to pay for that. And it was like, wait a second, this is a private company deciding, you know, I thought it was a private company, bro. And that was a pretty decent confirmation that if it came to it being public like that, you know, if there were ever a Facebook files, I'm sure we'd find out that that was after months of them getting on Mark Zuckerberg and saying, do this, do this, do this. Maybe he wasn't. And that was their shot across the bow to say, you know, we're going to make this tough. And then suddenly it's happening. I actually, you didn't ask, but I'll go ahead and say it. I think, and this probably isn't a popular opinion, I think Mark Zuckerberg is probably closer to, on a lot of ideas, to what Elon Musk was. Keep in mind, prior to like 2015, there was very little moderation of what could or could not be said on Facebook outside of, like, you know, death threats and you know, harassment and things like that. Like, it was pretty wide open. And I think what happens is when you rise to a certain level of prominence, you have multiple governments, not just the US government. You have multiple world governments putting the screws to you: the US government, the Chinese government, most of the EU governments, the Canadian government. You've got a lot of governments coming and saying, listen, you want to use our playground that we control here. You want to be a, you know, a multi-billionaire. You want to, you know, be one of the people leading us into the future. Fine. You do what we say when we say it. It's like a protection racket. Nice big tech company you got here. Be a real shame if something was to happen to it. And I think that, you know, Elon Musk is having to navigate his way around that as best he can. And I'm sure Zuckerberg is. Obviously, he's doing it in a much more, I think the difference between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg is, even though up until relatively recently, the last few years, Zuck was pretty much cool with any kind of speech for the most part, I think the difference is Zuck is a progressive. So yeah, they're putting the screws to him, but he largely agrees with them anyway. So that's okay. Whereas Elon Musk is pretty libertarian. I'm not sure I'd call him a libertarian, but he's definitely got that streak of like, how about you let me do it? And you know, and a lot of things he says, he's definitely right of center economically.
Yeah.
And I think socially, he's like, I don't care. He calls himself like in the middle, but honestly, when he starts describing it, it sounds suspiciously libertarian. I'm not going to claim he's a, you know, an ANCAP or a hardcore libertarian, but he's certainly in the liberty sphere, whereas Zuck isn't.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also like to point out we are so far left as far as the Overton window that anyone who's even halfway reasonable seems right, just because we're so far left on so many policies.
Yeah, and when I was saying right, I meant like from an economic standpoint,
Yeah.
like private ownership versus, forced collective ownership. So I meant it like in that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, from just the mainstream, and first of all, what does right even mean in the outside of like an economics context or something like
Yeah.
that? I mean, when I was, developing my opinions, thought I was some kind of a conservative, heard libertarianism, wasn't sure what I thought of that. I always associated the further you were right, the more you just wanted the government out of your lives. Well, now the people that are described as far right decidedly want the government in theirs and especially everyone else's life, telling them to live the way they do, or pretend to live. But and so, what does that even mean anymore? And now, yeah, like you said, I mean, I've seen the term right wing used to describe Russell Brand, who is a
Wow.
self-described socialist. Like he is, and if you watch his videos, makes a lot of incredible points,
Yep.
but he blasts the capitalists and he blasts, and he's right about, the abuse of corporatism and the quasi-fascist system we're turning into and all of that, but he blames capitalism, and he, believes in things like, universal everything, and he's a left winger. He's a
Yeah.
decidedly left winger, but because he isn't a shit lib, because he's not a, a center, I'm not even sure what to call, a new American century neo lib slash neo con, the status quo, I support the current thing type of NPC type. He's, now blasted as a right winger. So yeah, what does that even mean? There's like that meme where there's someone that says right wing and left wing, and there's just someone standing there kind of like this, and the left winger pushes them into the right wing, and then the where it says right wing moves over even into the
Yep.
left, and it's like, wait, what happened here? And yeah, so I mean, I'm not even sure what it means anymore, but I would say, just even by our standards, I think Elon's pretty fairly libertarian leaning on a lot of stuff, and the fact that he has been okay with some of the, the carve outs and deals he's gotten from government at taxpayer expense. That's the, again, duality of man. Just because he might believe that in principle doesn't mean he's not willing to put a few billion in his pocket to look the other way.
Well, I mean, he's fairly successful on the business front, so
Fairly, yes.
you
He's done
know,
okay.
yeah.
Occasionally, he's the richest man on earth. He's done all right. He's
Yeah.
done all right.
Probably not everything is principled libertarian, but then
Right.
again, how can you be at that level and also
You can't.
do exactly?
You cannot. You cannot. Yeah.
The system's not set up that way.
Yeah. No, if you were a principled libertarian can be successful. I don't believe you can be a principled libertarian. You won't be allowed to be, and that's what it is. It's not like, oh, if you're a libertarian, you won't be able to run a company like that. It's if you're a libertarian and live it by principle and refuse to, play ball on things that break your principle, they're not going to let you become the multi-billionaire owner of multiple multi-billion and even trillion-dollar companies. I mean, he's in China. Like
Yeah.
there's a certain level of stuff they're even going to let you say before they won't let you do business there. I remember the thing with John Cena, who's about the least political person on earth, freaking John Cena. And he's like having to make a video of, oh, I'm so sorry about, because he said whatever, or retweeted something or what. Ennis Cantor, now he's changed his name to Ennis Freedom, got kicked out of the NBA for
Yeah.
like basically for saying, the Turkish and Chinese governments are corrupt and people there are being mistreated and they're not free. That was enough for them to, I mean, they have people that have, that have raped people, that have assaulted people, that have committed violent crimes and God knows what else. And people make mistakes, but criticizing the Chinese government is completely unacceptable. We don't need that around children. Like, you're only going to be able to grow to so much without playing ball. And I get it. Like, I think he's also looking at this as, if I want us to become a spacefaring, traveling the stars species, I got to do this and play ball. And I mean, some of that's rationalization, but I hope he succeeds in that stuff.
Yeah. Um, I guess only time will tell, right?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So, one thing I wanted to ask you
Mhm.
is so there's that famous Ron Paul quote, which I think he also was quoting somebody else, but it was when when an idea's time has come, it's impossible to stop it. Of course, I'm
Yep. Yep.
paraphrasing.
Yeah. Nothing could
Um,
stop, and nothing is. Yes,
yeah,
I'm trying to remember too, but yeah, nothing is powerful enough to stop an idea whose time has come, or something like that.
yes.
Yeah.
So has the time come for libertarianism or just liberty ideas? Is it actually the time?
I believe so, but I want to full disclosure here. I believe that liberty's time has long past come. I think the question is, are we ready to seize upon it? With each new day, as things get worse, as the reality of the increasingly dystopian nightmare that's being created around us is made clear and apparent to an increasing number of people, it becomes with each day, with each moment, more our time. And the flip side of that is it also means we have far more work to do. So it's as with all things, there's balance. So it becomes easier for us to make our point, but it also becomes, once we get there, we have more work to do. But the biggest question is, are we prepared to seize upon this? And if so, how are we going to do it? And I'm glad we're going to talk about that, because we have to do it. It's ready. It's been ready. I think it was ready 20, 30 years ago if we were ready to do it. It's a matter of, are we ready to do it? And then if we're ready to do it, here's how we need to do it, and are we ready to do that? Because it's one thing to say I'm ready to win for liberty, it's another thing to say I'm ready, here is the roadmap of what we're going to do, and I'm ready to do that. I'm ready to do it, and I hope others are as well.
Uh, I would have to agree. I've been there. I feel as though if we wait any longer, we're gonna miss the opportunity. Um,
Very
if
possibly.
if things get too far, we're going to lose the ability to ever gain it back. Um,
I like the precipice argument that, like, we're at a moment where if we don't do it, it's never going to happen. It's possible. I tend to think of things on more of like a sliding line, a sliding scale, where it's like it'll still be possible if we wait too long or longer, but it's just going to be that much harder. It's like, I guess there is truly a point where it's just too late. I think that looks a lot more like what's happening. I think even in China, the right conditions could spark to cause a revolution for freedom. But look at how far they'd have to come. Not just in, because we talk a lot about the system that's imposed upon us, but another thing that they'll have to deal with, and that we have to deal with here to I guess to a lesser extent compared to them, but still to quite an extent, not just the system itself, but the fact that the vast majority of people, even though if you look at a poll that says that, I think only 13% of Americans like the way things are going, almost well over 90% think that this is still the system to do it in. They just think the wrong guys in charge, or the wrong parties are in charge, or some new power needing, a government's not quite big enough, or maybe this part of government needs to be marginally smaller and this part needs to be marginally bigger, but they still think it needs to be within this system, within the way things are going right now. And that's probably uh besides I mean, honestly, even more than the system itself, is the real power of the system is the fact that so many people believe in it. That's the biggest power it has.
so what do you think? Of course, this is kind of a generalized question, but
Sure.
exactly where do we go from here? There's tons of options. We've got the LP. We've got all kinds of liberty-minded conservatives. We've got you
Hmm.
or the power,
Yep.
the Mises Caucus. There's options to
Hmm.
get out there, and obviously we need a little bit of everything.
Yes.
But what's some of the best ways that we could actually just move forward to actually show some sort of winning on our side?
Sure. So I want to start with the political party end of it, and then I'll go on to other things as well. Um, And this, when I say the political party stuff, I'm a partisan libertarian. I don't plan on voting for anyone who's not in the Libertarian Party. I fully respect people who, will strategically vote for certain Republicans or even certain Democrats or independents or whatever else. I'd be much more likely to vote for an independent or another third party person than a Republican or Democrat. Just because I think you're feeding the system. Even if that candidate's good, you're still feeding the uniparty or duopoly or Republicrats or whatever you want to call it. But I primarily want to put my focus in electoral politics in the Libertarian Party. And I think what the Libertarian Party needs to do, and from what I've in talking with leadership of the party, I believe this is their plan with the decentralized revolution and all of that. We need to, first of all, understand where we are. And where we are is that a lot of people, even identifying as libertarians, don't vote for us, for our party, because they think we can't win. And that's like the most frustrating paradox of all, right? Because they go, well, I'd vote for you if you could win. Well, I'd win if you voted for me. Like it's the most infuriating thing. And the problem is we've talked about it that way for a very long time. Well, we could win if you voted for us. Well, I'm not going to vote for you. So you just said you can't win. And it's like you want to pull your hair out and you want to scream at them and call them, road cucks and all that stuff. And I get it. Like I've done my fair share of road cuck calling out there. But the fact is, once I stopped looking at this from why won't these people vote for my party, even though it's so superior to the other ones, and started thinking about it as someone who has been in the business world for 24 years, Jesus, I'm old, for decades now, and has been done very well in sales and marketing. This is a product like anything else, or you have to look at it as a product or service. Politics is sales. And what the customer, the voter, is telling us is, I don't think your product's going to work for me. And if you say, well, it could if you bought it, well, they already said they're not going to buy it. So you're saying it's not going to work for them. So how do we change that? Well, first of all, we already are winning in many races. We have hundreds of elected libertarians across the country, but they're in the less sexy races. They're in the city councils and mayors and town boards and school boards and, stuff like that. Things that aren't quite as sexy. But the thing is, it's hundreds of elected libertarians. And we're doing that despite the fact that our primary focus has always been on the races that we never win. President, vice president, I did this. President, vice president, Senate, governor, races that many of which, including president and vice president, that we have to run in, if only for ballot access reasons. And if we're running them, we should run good, solid campaigns and try to get the message out there. And the people running, even if they don't have a shot in hell of winning, they should still be running to win, because nothing demotivates a voter like thinking like you're not even trying to win in the first place. But our primary focus, our primary resources, and even some of the focus of those candidates running for those higher offices needs to be where we're already winning. Because if we push up and uplift and promote and put our focus where we're already winning, then we start changing the narrative on that. We start showing people that not only do we win, we're already winning. And when we tell the stories of the people who have won and what they've been able to accomplish, now we say when a libertarian wins, it's not like when a Republican or Democrat wins. When a Republican or Democrat wins, the Republicans and Democrats win. The parties win, those candidates win, the cronies that own them win, the bureaucrats that they control win. When a libertarian wins, you win. And when we do that, that changes the focus entirely. Instead of becoming, well, you can't win, it becomes, wow, you do win, and I win too. I get something out of the fact that I voted libertarian. They may initially only vote locally, but they're at least voting for you locally. And what happens is now they're aligned with individuals and with personalities who they recognize are good for them. So they vote for that person in city council, then for mayor, then for state rep or state senate or whatever, then maybe for governor or for Congress or for Senate. So even if it doesn't immediately lead to people voting, which I think it will also increase the number of people voting up ticket as well, it's going to get them voting for people who themselves will work their way up the ballot. And as long as, and this is the second part of it, and I believe this is in decentralized revolution as well, when they're in there, it's not just, hey, look, I won and I can win again. It's, I won. Now here's the work we're going to do. And by the way, you didn't think that we were powerful enough to affect anything federally? Well, we're about to nullify a bunch of bad federal and state laws here at the local level. And you're going to see just how much power we have right here in our own backyards, empowering voters and letting them know that, yeah, voting for the right city council person or the right sheriff or the right state rep, suddenly now you're not as worried about what's happening in Congress because it's already been nullified in your neck of the woods. So there's a lot of good stuff that the party can do there, and it looks like that they're poised to do that stuff, and I'm certainly happy to see that happening. But there's only so much that can be done in a political party because, first of all, most people don't see themselves as political, even if they are hyper political and are involved in lots of causes and things like that. They don't see themselves as political, and there's only so much before people get politics fatigue. And so what we're doing with You Are the Power is filling that gap between what a political party can do and the needs of people. So what we're doing is we're finding people in need of help, whether it's a charitable need, whether it is, they're being abused or mistreated by their local government, anything like that. We find out about them. We alert the public about what's happening with them. We get our membership involved and organized with helping them. We get we find other organizations in that area we have common cause with to work on that issue with them. We get the local public involved and get them organized around it. And now that everyone is excited about this thing and organized around this thing and fighting to help with this thing, we use it as an opening conversation about how the problem was created by too much power being in the hands of too few people. And the solution is being created by voluntary, free people working together on a shared goal and sharing the message of liberty on causes that people already care about. So there are many things we need to be doing, both to bring people into the liberty movement and expose them to our ideas in a way that connects with them, and then to also show them that libertarians, in the political realm, in the electoral realm, that libertarians can win right now, and when they win, that you win too.
So one thing I've actually been contemplating, also dealing with, my local LP. I'm actually the chairman of my county affiliate, and I work close with the Utah Libertarian Party.
Okay.
It's kind of, I kind of agree with the sentiment that the point to a political party is to get people elected.
Yeah.
Obviously that makes sense. But I disagree with the fact that that's the only thing that we can do. I do believe that we're not a political action group. We're nothing like an organization like You Are the Power or anything.
Of course.
But beyond just getting people elected, I also feel that it's the duty of the party to provide a stable foundation for candidates to run on. And there's going to have to probably be some things that we do that aren't traditional political party roles.
Absolutely.
But it's at this point we have no power, and we should just be throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks.
Well, there's that too, right? Like, we should be trying stuff. Like, if it seems like it might make, there are going to be some stuff where we go, that's just crazy enough to work, and then we try it and it turns out it worked or it didn't. And another aspect to that is, one of the telling characteristics of someone who will end up being hyper successful, one of the biggest ones, is a lack of aversion to trying new things and failing. Like, they're not scared of it. They're not, and I wouldn't necessarily call myself hyper successful. I'm not a billionaire or anything like that, but I've been fairly successful, and I don't like failing, but I also look at failure as an opportunity to learn and to learn from what I did wrong and retool for the next thing and figure out, what worked, what didn't work, and all of that. So there's going to be some of that. I'm not sure I would say, and I think we're saying the same thing, but maybe just different wording. I think everything within the Libertarian Party is going to be political in nature, but it won't necessarily be electoral. It won't be about and I think that's what you meant. It won't be about a campaign or a candidate, but it'll be about something that has a political a political tint to it or political message to it.
Correct.
And something that you can build a campaign around. So, like, for example, if the Libertarian Party of what's your county again?
Weber County.
Weaver County. So if the Libertarian Party of Weaver County sees a
Weber.
cause, Weber,
Yeah.
okay, of Weber County, finds a cause in your county that lines up 100% with what libertarians believe. So like, and I'm just throwing out an example, but like someone at the county or city level in Weber County is wildly abusing eminent domain, and they're just seizing properties, condemning them, seizing them left and right. And it's for like the most, it's not for a highway, it's not for any whatever reason that the public might go, well, I guess we need that, but it's like just the most disgusting thing you could, they're doing it, it's another Kilo thing where they're doing it to build a mini mall or something like that, and the public is already pretty upset about it. And you guys, the Libertarian Party, and this is something you or the power would seize upon too, we would use it just to share the liberty message. It would be incumbent upon any candidate or party to make it about their party and their campaign and their candidate. But it's, ultimately it's two different ways of trying to share the same type of a message. But you could take that and find a local group, save our our homes or whatever, some local group that's banding together against it, and work with them. Single issue coalitions are huge. Find common cause, get your best speakers in the county party, your best people that you can put front facing in front of cameras, and get them out there and get them talking about it, and make it clear the Libertarian Party is directly against this. We'll fight tooth and nail against this. Where are our Republican and Democrat friends? Why aren't they here joining us to call out against this? Or if they are, we welcome our Republican and Democrat friends in finally joining us and calling against these kinds of abuses that their parties have been doing for decades, blah, blah, blah. And then if you can get enough traction on it and enough goodwill on it, now you run candidates on it. Okay. Not only were we against this thing, and maybe it's one of those people that you've been putting in front of the cameras, or it's someone else, or maybe one of those people who's fighting says, you know what? I think I'm a libertarian too. I'm going to run for county council. And now you can support them, and they can do their thing. So that can parlay itself into electoral politics. So I do think, I will say this, if you're going to be a political party, I think that all of your resources should at least be indirectly towards supporting an eventual campaign or candidate, even if it's not one that's even been identified yet, but that this can help in the future towards that. I think that that's going to include getting the message out there. But the problem is, I've seen where some people have said, we're just going to use this party, either a local or state affiliate, or even some who have said that we should do that with the national level. We're just going to use it to spread the message. The problem is, it's hard to quantify that. And it's hard to, the metrics are shaky on that. You can say we've gotten this many shares, we've gotten this many, this is our organic reach or whatever. But the problem is that doesn't always tell the whole story. You can put something out there that everyone hates, and that's technically organic reach. So, it's hard to quantify that as a success in spreading the message. But if you can do some of that with the end goal of getting some people elected, even if they're not even identified yet, that's a metric you can point at. You can say this person got elected. And then when they got elected, they were able to pass this many things, and they were actually able to stop the thing that was our original cause that we were going on. So I do think it should be obviously always political. But even if it's not directly involved in an electoral campaign, there should always be a mind towards how this eventually, either immediately or in the short term, in the short or medium term, funnels into political success, electoral successes. Whereas with You Are the Power, what we're doing is on similar causes like that, on similar charitable efforts and all of that stuff, we're saying our funnel, which is immediate, is get people into saying, yes, liberty is the way. Respecting rights and autonomy is the way. Centralization of authority, central planning, putting too much power in the hands of people, of too few people, not having accountability for them, trusting them to take care of us, that's not working. Well, those people are now prime for a Libertarian Party of Weber County or wherever else. So I mean, again, we're a 501c4, so we are not here
Yeah.
for any political party. It would honestly, if there's a really good Republican Liberty Caucus in that area, it would be great for them. If there's a really great independent candidate, it would be really great for them. But that's on them.
Yeah.
That's on them to do that. Our goal is just to grow the liberty movement through causes, through getting people excited and organized, through building that network effect of people around each other, talking about liberty all the time, organizing, training, getting excited. This is their thing now. And suddenly they're, very effective liberty activists.
It's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the on-ramp to the freeway of liberty, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at a very basic level, like, I mean, some of the stuff we're taking on is things like a zoning board shouldn't be able to kick a lady out of her home and try to steal her land because she's living in an RV because her house burned
Yeah.
down and it's being rebuilt. Like, no one
I remember
disagrees with
that.
that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and no one disagrees with that. There's not going to be, even the people doing it to her know they're wrong. Like, no one is sitting there thinking, you know what? This is good. This is
Yeah,
a good
this
thing we're
makes
doing.
sense.
This makes sense. This is helpful for society. It's literally just greedy, corrupt people doing it, right? Whatever
Yeah.
maybe those handful of people have deluded themselves. No one is showing up in favor of that, right? And so we pick some like very low-hanging fruit because everyone's already upset about it, or they don't know yet. And when they find out, they're going to be very upset about it. And when they find out that we have a relatively easy initial call to action, now they're like, wow, I can help. And we go, oh, that helped a lot. Here's how you can help further. And a lot of them go, okay, great. How do we do that? And we go, oh, well, here, you can show up to this. And if you want to do more stuff like this in your community, here's some training that we have available. It's a lot of fun. We get together, we have fun, we learn stuff, and you get them onboarded. You get them not just onboarded into the brass tacks of how, but the brass tacks of why. You get them onboarded to hearing over and over again, because of course we do best when we're most free, and of course we need to disrupt this over centralization of power. And they're like, yeah, of course we do. And you get them into it, and suddenly they go from zero to liberty activists. And and then whether they stay on with you or the power, and that's just the thing that they're doing, and they're organizing in their community, maybe they find the Libertarian Party of their county, or maybe they become they decide to take over the Democrat or Republican Party and make it more libertarian, or maybe they say, I don't even care about electoral politics, I'm just going to try to help people around in my community. Maybe they run for office as an independent or something. Whatever they choose to do, we have gotten them onboarded into liberty. That's our goal. Whatever happens after that, that's up to those people and the candidates and the parties and everything else. For both legal and strategic reasons, we're staying out of that. We are just here to grow the liberty movement and to help people, because that's the other problem. While we've been sitting here trying to figure out how to square the circle, or circle the square, I always forget which one it is. Try to solve the unsolvable puzzle of growing the liberty movement. People are suffering now, so let's help them.
So one thing, obviously, like here in Utah, it's a very deep red state.
Yes.
And it's Republican through and through. It's Republican to the point that even some Democrats run as Republican, because there's outside of Salt Lake County, you're not going to win unless you're a Republican. I mean, Libertarian Party's actually growing pretty well. My vice chair ran this last midterm cycle, got 28%.
Wow.
For being a political nobody, first time running, ran for county commissioner, and I was impressed. He was a little bummed. I was like, what are you talking about? That's 29%.
No one knew who you were.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, you need to be proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
But also run into a lot of people who believe the Libertarian Party is not viable for election. And also run into a lot of people that are just stuck on the Republican because it's the most important election ever.
Yes.
And so really, what's the best way to address these people? our governor, for instance, Governor Cox, a lot of Republicans are very unhappy with him. And I always try to point out he's still a party back candidate.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yep.
tends to open a lot of people's eyes and say, okay, wow, that I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole rhino thing is such nonsense, right? Like I remember being a Republican and going, yeah, well, that's a rhino. It's not a real Republican. It's just the name only. He's the leadership of the party. Like I'm
Yeah.
not talking about
Yeah.
some schmuck who shows up to Republican stuff with a Medicare for all shirt. These are like the actual elected Republicans with
Yeah.
like the most power. You know, Mitch McConnell's a rhino. Mitch McConnell's the most powerful Republican in DC right now. What are you talking about? I've even
Yeah.
started hearing people go, well, Donald Trump's really more of a rhino. Donald Trump was your last president. Like, I mean, get like your last Republican, like enough. You're the
Yeah.
rhino. You are the rhino. You're the one who is waiting for this party to actually follow its values, right? And it's so frustrating dealing with people who say that. But here's what you need to understand. That person who says, well, yeah, I'll say this first and then I'll go into explaining it. That person who says, well, they're just a rhino, or this is the most important election of our time, or whatever. They're what we call late adopters. They're concerned primarily about, is everyone else doing this? What is? I'm going to go with the consensus among my group. Like the people saying, I'm not sure you can win. Those are the people kind of signaling, not always, sometimes they're just saying it because they have no response, but sometimes they're signaling that they kind of like what you have to say, but they're not sure they need to make sure they know it's going to work first. And that's the early majority. So there's a thing called the theory of dissemination of ideas. And what the theory of dissemination ideas says, in any given population, there's five main groups. And there's obviously some overlap between them. It's not like you get branded. It's not like that Divergent movie where you get a thing and you're only that or whatever. There's some overlap, but there's innovators, there's early adopters, there's early majority, there's late majority, and there's the laggards. So the innovators and early adopters, that's us. The innovators are the ones, they come up with the ideas. They're the ones who strip things down to first principles. They figure out how it works, how it doesn't work, and they make the new stuff. They're the ones who are always coming up with the new things. They're at the forefront of new ideas. They often sound crazy, even to people who kind of agree with them, because they're out there making all the new stuff. The early adopters, and many of us are early adopters. And when I say us, I'm talking about people in the LP, is almost entirely innovators and early adopters. The early adopters, they may not be the ideas people coming up with new ideas, but they get it quickly. They're like, yes, that makes perfect sense. And they don't care if it's popular, and they're not even waiting to prove that it works. They're just like, yeah, this is what matters. Everyone needs to know, these are, whenever there's some new technology that works for well, they're the first people to get it if they can, like that. This is who they are. Then you've got the early majority. The early majority are people who, they recognize that there's a problem. They don't like how things work. They might like what you're saying, but before they're going to buy on, they need to see that it works. These are the people that you get with, you get them over with things like, winning elections at the local level, or with successfully building policy coalitions who are able to stop things from happening or get things to happen, right? The LA County Libertarians were part of a successful effort to get rid of the vaccine mandates. I think it was the vaccine. It was one of the mandates. I think it was the vaccine mandates. Well, that shows early adopters like, oh, wow, okay, they can get stuff done. The late majority, they may or may not even recognize that there's an issue. They probably get it, but not necessarily so much. They may or may not agree with you. They just want to see where everyone else whose opinion, who's in their circle, where they're going. So if they see other voters are voting for you, you've got them. Once you get the late majority, you're now the primary. You have won. You're the people in charge now. You're the ones whose ideas have become mainstream. The laggards are ones you may or may not ever get. Honestly, in politics, it's not even all that necessary to get laggards. That's more important if you're trying to like sell a product and want to have maximum market saturation. You have to use like fear-based advertising with them, because like they're literally just, they're going to die before they start something. We're not worried about them. We're already the innovators and early adopters. We get a lot of those, but we're pretty saturated there. We need to worry about getting early majority by showing that our way works and that it works for them, and late majority by showing that this is what people are into. And it's the early majority that helps us get the late majority. If we focus on that, then that's how we get this. Now, how do we actually implement that? Well, that's what we've been talking about. You got it. A lot of these people, it's not going to be a thing you say to them that changes it. It's going to be demonstrating to them that you're addressing their issue. If their issue is you can't win, you got to win. You got to pour resources and time and effort into winning causes that can lead to winning campaigns for local and regional offices to show them that we win. And when we win, they win as well. And the other ones, honestly, a lot of that work's going to be done once you do that. They're going to see that people are, that the early majority is voting for them, and now they go along as well because they go with the herd. That we have to address a lot of this stuff. We as libertarians, many of us got here because someone said something to us and it got stuck in our head and we realized that it made the most logical sense. That's not how most people operate. If we could have won this by arguing, we would have already won. Like the taxation is theft meme would have ended the IRS. Like because our ideas make the most sense. Most people aren't worried about making the best logical argument. They have their political ideas are ad hoc. They aren't really thinking these things through. It's much more visceral. It's much more like, well, how am I going to pay my rent? How are my kids going to afford to go to college? And if you can demonstrate stuff, then you might get them. But you're not going to say, the non-aggression principle makes the most sense because you can't delegate to someone a right that you yourself don't have. They don't know. They don't give a crap about that stuff. Yeah. And we've got the people that you can get with that. And in fact, a lot of the people that you can get with that still walk away because they go, okay, great. I agree with you 100%. We aren't winning. So even a lot of the early adopters want to see some success before we can actually get them back. So that's what our work has to be.
So one thing I want to ask about is, it's something I've been asking, not just myself, but other people within the movement as well, is where are all the radicals? And to expand on that, what I mean is that our first chair of the Utah Libertarian Party, his name was Carl Bray, and he was a tax rebel. He used to dress up as Paul Revere and ride a horse through one of the parks in downtown Salt Lake and hand out Carl Bray dollars and tell everyone, take these because the Federal Reserve notes are going to be worthless. And obviously, I don't want to take away from anyone's hard work because there are a lot of people doing great work in the party across all the states. Yeah. But like the theatrics, where I don't see much of that going on these days.
Like you said, there are people that are doing it. I honestly think some of it, not all, but some of it is, I think there's two main things. And I'll start with the positive one, which I think some of it is a sign of maturity. And I'm not saying Carl Bray was immature. I want to clarify what I'm saying here. As you work your way past a certain point, the hey, look at me becomes less important than the here's what I'm doing, right? So like this was I ran with Vermin Supreme. As it was Vermin Spike 2020. We were proposed running mates, and the message that Vermin and I both kept hearing was, Vermin is great to get people's attention. We're out of that being our primary concern phase. People there are people that know who we are. There are people that don't know who we are, but at this point, our focus needs to be on what we do. I would think that, Carl, I don't know Carl Bray, and I've never heard of that. But that's a really cool thing. I would think even a Carl Bray at this point would be saying, okay, great, that had the success it did. Here's the next thing. Like, here's where we go into that. So some of that is a sign of the organization reaching a point of saying that's not as important as this. Another thing I would say is the theatrics are different now. So like, for example, we might not have as many people that are dressing up as Paul Revere and riding around and handing out, equally fake money as Federal Reserve notes. I love that's a cool thing though. We might need to bring that back actually. But we have people on TikTok, we have people on YouTube, we have people on Facebook, we have people on Instagram, and they're doing the trend stuff that gets people's attention. I saw like the Libertarian Party of Arkansas had like a video that got like 4 million views or something like that. Like it's happening out there. So that's the new theatrics, and some of that is just changing with the times. I also think some of it is that, and this is a problem that all nonprofits and political parties deal with, but I think we've especially had the issue is there's a lot of churn, man. Like there's a lot of people who put a lot of time and effort into this party, and they went into it knowing that they probably weren't going to win very much, but it just put so much demand on them. And there were, we could get into a whole variety. I mean, I did for a year and a half, I did a speaking thing at at a number of the conventions talking about the culture of losing and the culture of winning. But the long story short is, within the party, we need to and are working on shedding a culture of like, all right, there's like 7 of us and we're going to just do a bunch of shit. And then it may or may not work. And we'll do this until we decide we don't want to anymore, into it being like, no, here's a strategy. Here's a game plan. Here's what we're going to do. So I think it's a variety of reasons. But I do kind of like the idea of coming back with the Paul Revere thing. That's pretty cool, actually.
Right.
But now put it on social media so that it goes viral and other people see it too.
And what was also interesting about Carl, he sadly he's one of the people of the party who's kind of faded into obscurity, which is why I like to talk about him as much as I can get a chance to.
That's good. Yeah, no, people should know.
And it was right when Nixon put the price controls on after taking us off the gold standard.
Yeah.
Carl had actually owned a bullion business here in Ogden, Utah, and he actually, in open defiance against the government, refused to put price controls on his bullion and took out a full-page ad in the Salt Lake Tribune telling the government blatantly that he was not going to do it. It's a full-page ad,
Yeah.
And I like to see libertarians lead by example.
I agree with that.
No,
go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's we shouldn't just be talking these ideas, and that's why I like to highlight people on this show who I believe do lead by example. And that's not to say other people are not, of course.
Oh yeah.
We can't, spotlight everyone, but I'll damn sure try.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, it was just that I just want to see more people lead by example, living the libertarian ideals.
I agree. I mean, obviously, the decision whether or not to non-comply, to in many cases break the law or anything like that, that's a personal decision to make. Everyone needs to make it. And I always preface saying that, I'm not out here saying everyone break the law. But here's what I will say. And I talk about this a lot. There is no such thing as government power. There is a certain level of consensus of agreeing to go along to get along. There's what the people will tolerate. And we talk about, getting the majority on our side. When it comes to non-compliance, you usually don't really need the majority in some areas. So depending on the thing and depending on the area, you might only need like 1 to 3% of the population, even on stuff that it's like, you're in a very authoritarian place and they have big numbers of enforcers. 5-10%. Like it's 10% would be high. 5%. If you get 5% of the population, or even 1 to 3%, just saying no, I'm not going to do that, it becomes effectively impossible to enforce. And they'll try, and they'll make examples out of people. But if the people stand firm and go, I'm not going to do that, then what happens pretty quickly is the government says, hey, great news, everyone. We decided we don't need this anymore. And what's really happening is they're having to do a tactical retreat, because otherwise they have to acknowledge that they don't have the power that they say they do. I gave an example and people got not everyone, but a few people got upset about it. On New Year's Day, or maybe the day after, I put up a video showing this gigantic fireworks show that happens every New Year's Eve in Hawaii. I forget which
Yeah,
of
I
the
saw
islands.
that.
Well, the use of fireworks, of what they call aerial fireworks, the fireworks that go in the air, is highly illegal unless you get one of these professional pyrotechnic permits, and they're very difficult to get. There might be a couple thousand people that have them, and they're all professionals. And yet, the entire population of Hawaii basically goes out, buys these fireworks, some legally, some illegally, and just they're all over it's like the freaking it's like the 4th of July as an island, and it goes on for hours. It's insane. And I said, because it's effectively impossible to enforce, they just don't. They can't. They can't. What were you going to arrest this guy and there's 300 other people right next to like they don't have the resources to do it, and the popularity. If they really did try to crack down, everyone would be like, what are you doing? Leave them alone. We're just having fun. It's New Year's. The people are not on their side. So it's illegal year round, but they just don't enforce it, and everyone knows it, and so they just do it. And people were like jumping on me, not everyone, but a few people were like, what are you talking? Hawaiians love their government. They comply with everything. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly the point. I'm not saying that the Hawaiian people are freedom fighters. I'm saying that even a state that has a pretty high level of compliance with some terrible shit is still, even if they refuse to comply with something, it becomes effectively impossible to enforce. And that's just the reality of it. We just saw in China, they're having to back off of the zero COVID stuff because even in one of the worst authoritarian hellholes with one of the biggest, most oppressive police states, possibly the biggest and most oppressive police state on the planet, they couldn't make them. And so they cracked down on the protesters, but they also backed off. They were like, well, maybe not zero COVID, and yeah, we'll have to reopen some stuff. And then they cracked down on the remaining protesters, but they had to make a tactical retreat. So there is something to be said about mass noncompliance. I remember the flack I was getting from many self-described libertarians during the vice presidential campaign when we were routinely doing events in open violation of COVID orders. And we'd show up and they'd say, you don't have a permit. And we'd say, your permit office isn't open. And they go, well, you can't do this. And we'd say, we are doing it. We have a right to peacefully assemble. These people are here and, no one's being violent. And if you have to arrest people, here we are, but we're going to do it. And I was never arrested. No one, there was one person arrested at one of my events, and it was over a gun thing. It was, he was open carrying in a place that wasn't allowed or something like that. And that the charges ended up getting dropped on that because we made a big deal of it on social media, but no one else got arrested. And the biggest one was in Miami. They straight up told us, they shut down the venue that we were going to have the event at. And they said, you can't do it here. And they wouldn't let us in the building. So we did it outside. We took over like an entire section of Calle Ocho in downtown Miami, and which made it way bigger because there's only going to be maybe 100 or so people inside this building having a after hours salsa party political thing. And instead, now we're out in the streets dancing with people in the public just walking. There's thousands of people, and the police are there. And they can't do it. I said, well, then, arrest me. I'm going to do it anyway. And we did. And we did it anyway. We're out there with bullhorns, and I'm giving people a bullhorn to ask them to tell their stories about how the COVID regime has ruined their lives or made things more difficult for them. People are lining up to tell their story. We tore there was no roof, but we tore the roof that wasn't there off of Calle Ocho in the middle of in downtown Miami there, and it was an open defiance of multiple police officers who were right there, and the media showed up, and it was a whole thing. It would have gotten a lot more coverage if Joe Biden and Donald Trump hadn't both been there that same day doing their debate thing that they did. But all that to say, like, you have to you have to make your own decision.
Yeah.
I have many times chosen to just refuse to comply. And I'm not going to pretend I'm some dyed in the wool warrior. There's many things I comply with. There's many things all of us comply with. We have to choose what we do or don't comply with based on a variety of personal factors. Like, you have to make that choice for yourself. But what I will tell you is the more of us don't comply with something, the more it doesn't matter. the more it eventually either goes away or just is selectively enforced, or they just kind of look the other way, or whatever. We saw that with mask mandates. I'd go to a place and there were a handful of people, including me, who weren't wearing masks. I'd go back the next time and there were a lot more people. And then by the next time I was there, the mask mandate wasn't there anymore. They're not going to be able to keep enforcing it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's interesting because I agree. We all have to internally deal with, how far are we going to
Yep.
take something.
Mhm.
Obviously, the number one pushback I usually hear or have heard has been, well, I have kids, I can't do this, I can't do that, and
Yep.
once again, you got to make the choice for yourself. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I would like to remind people, our founding fathers, a lot of our revolutionaries, they had kids too. They
Mhm.
had families, and they were willing, to go to the gallows for some of this.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying everyone should, but you know, you should ask yourself exactly how serious are you going to take this? We've effectively nullified federal marijuana laws at this
Yep.
point in this country
Yep. Yep.
because people just don't comply with it.
Yep.
And that can happen in a very peaceful way with many other things.
And as a result of that, many states caught up with it. Like cannabis is still 100% as illegal in California as it is here in South Carolina, where the state police will straight up throw you in prison the same as if you had
Yeah.
heroin. It is every bit as illegal as it was 30 years ago. It is every bit as illegal. And it's been nullified for the majority of citizens in the United States, with more promising. South Carolina will be like the last one. We're like the worst for almost everything. It's wild. We even our gun laws suck. Like you would think a deep red state would have good gun laws. Our gun laws suck. But anyway, so it's happening. Like it's happening, and it's happening because of mass noncompliance turned into because there's mass noncompliance, and then there's the network effect of people who may or may not even smoke weed going, what's the problem? They're smoking weed. Leave them alone. So
Yeah.
that's when it really becomes, because you got the difficulty in enforcing it, and the public's not on your side anymore, because you had to be brutal to try to enforce it to make an example out of them. And the public's going, what the hell is your problem? Like, the guy's smoking a joint. Leave him alone. Like, or
Yeah.
he was selling a bag of weed. We're like, why are you destroying this person's life over this? And then especially, and this is something we can work with Common Cause, with single issue people with. Once it was like, yeah, cannabis is a great way for veterans with PTSD to get help, or for children with certain epileptic disorders to get help they need, or your grandmother who, God forbid, is on chemo and it helps her have an appetite so she can live longer. What, were you going to arrest them for that? There was an example in Kansas. They literally raided this guy who's dying because he had a THC vape. And you know what happened? This is Kansas, very illegal. They have no medical cannabis. It's just as illegal as it is here in South Carolina. They dropped the charges because the public was like, why are you doing this? He's dying. It's medicine. It should be legal. Why are you doing this? And the cops, who always tell us, I don't make the laws, I just enforce them. They didn't. They dropped the charges. Just whatever, I don't know if the DA or whoever there in that local, in that county or that town, they dropped the charges. Mass non-compliance works. And like,
Yeah.
and like Jacob said, you got to make your own decisions. I hesitate to say this because I don't have kids. So I'm not going to try to pretend that, as a fellow parent, here's what I have to say. I don't have kids.
Yeah.
I will say this, and this is more of as an academic thing. Your kids are going to be here when you're not. And we have to decide what the world looks like for them. So I absolutely understand. I'm not trying to shame or guilt anyone into doing anything, because you have to make that decision. And I want to make sure I'm here to provide for my kids, and that's a very valid reason to comply with a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily comply with. It is worth considering the fact that there may be things that you want to do to make sure that the future they're in is freer than yours, or at the very least, not less free than yours. So again, these are calculated risks people have to
Yep.
take. You have to live with it. I do not. Do not ever think that I'm telling people to, to jump off the bridge, especially when I am in compliance with a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff that I
Yeah.
do that I do, that I don't want to do, like the rest of us, because I have to pick and choose. I've made my calculations of what it is. So I'm not, some guy in the woods ready to start the revolution telling you to join me. I'm saying all of us have to make those calculated, strategic decisions on, like, what are we willing to tolerate, what aren't we willing to tolerate, and our individual and familial and community life factors all factor into that. And that's decisions we have to make.
Ultimately, that's why I decided to get as involved as I am.
Yep.
Um, having these thoughts of I'm not a parent either currently.
Yep.
That is in the future life plan for myself and my wife.
Mhm.
Um, just the thought of my child asking, what did I do, was just horrifying to me. To just think, oh, I just
Yep.
did nothing. I sat by and maybe made a meme or two. That wasn't good enough for me.
Memes are powerful though, but yes, I
They
get
are.
what
Yeah, it's I mean, we have straight up bullied federal agencies, out of existence.
yes.
So, but not doing anything was just a terrifying thought to me.
Yep.
And the point I'm terrified of for other freedom fighters as well is to the point that, we might have some people end up having to be arrested because they stand up for what's right.
Yep.
And I don't want to see any of us get to that point, even though I think we've kind of passed that point, depending on what subject you're talking about.
Yep.
But I still ask myself, where's all the cowboys? It's just kind of interesting, of course, that risk versus reward. And I would never advocate for somebody going
Of
out
course.
there to do something, but there's a point. I was even having a discussion with my wife the other night and saying, if it ever came to that, I would gladly spend a night or two in jail if I was on the right side of having to make a choice. That would be something I would sacrifice, although I
Yep.
don't want to.
No one wants to. No one's like, yay, prison or jail or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, no, yay, fines, even. I mean, no one
Yeah.
likes that. Yay, having my license suspended or whatever. Like, I mean, that no one likes those things. I will say there are certain things that, like, I have done that have been in non-compliance, and I will happily do again. If and when there are ever any other kind of, I'm waiting for them to do it for climate change. I think we're probably not
Oh,
quite there
man.
yet, but I'm waiting for that, and I will be happy to violate that stuff, because there's also the, like, well, what am I willing to tell other people I did? And there are certain things, if I say it and people go, I'm not sure if I agree with that, but saying I went outside because the sun was hot, and that apparently it was a sun is hot day, and that means that I can't go outside. So with COVID, I, with a clear conscience, said, yeah, I've violated many of those orders, and I didn't encourage others to do so, but said I'm doing this, and in fact would let people know, like, hey, listen, if you've got priors, if you got warrants and stuff out there, you may not want to be at this thing. Like,
Yeah.
that's your decision, but we're doing illegal stuff here, and another one is feeding homeless people. We're planning some homeless feedings. They're actually just, and I shouldn't even say homeless feed. We're planning to go to public places and give out food to whoever's there without a license. Because why the hell do you need a license for that? Yeah, I know. Because it's unsafe. It's so unsafe. We're gonna, beat you and tase you for your safety, and make sure people starve for their safety. And we'll be doing more of those. And I'm sure many of the people we'll be feeding are homeless, and some of them will just be
Yeah.
people at the park who'd also like a breakfast taco or whatever, or a sandwich
Yeah.
or whatever. And we may get arrested. We may get fined. We may just be physically removed and told don't come back. And we'll be live streaming the whole thing. So
Yeah.
that there's a power to that. So but even there you can decide, well, how much are you not willing to comply? Because technically having an officer physically remove you from a place is an act of aggression. Are you going to defend that? I personally likely wouldn't. But some people might.
If you
That's their
decide to
decision
go
to make.
dead weight,
That's
there's no
yeah,
problem.
or even I wouldn't even say dead weight you could certainly do, but some people might make them dead weight. And,
Yeah.
that's really their decision to make. I don't really advocate for that. I think besides it being in a murky ethical and moral place, it's also you're going to make everyone hate you if you punch a cop or something like that. Even if you are fully in the right, anyway, point I'm
Well,
making
and
is,
how effective would that really be?
and that's the thing, right? Like I had someone ask me one time, they're like, well, all the existence of the state is active aggression, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm an anarchist. I believe that. Yes. Well, then wouldn't any violent action against the state be justified? And I said, sure, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you not to bomb the library. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that you're first of all, that probably isn't there isn't even a there isn't even a cerebral moral argument to be made there. But I mean, there's even something that's, I mean, very few people want to bomb the library, but like, someone who's like, yeah, if I saw cops, I'm going to go do something or whatever. And it's like, even if you could make some philosophically grounded moral argument that all acts against the police are inherently defensive because their existence is an imposition and blah 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 blah, A, kind of murky. B, what's like, you have to also, part of your principles have to be like, is this going to work? And are you just going to make people embrace the police state even more and see you as the aggressive terrorist
Yep.
monster? If so, probably don't do that. Like, pick and choose your battles, not just from your own personal, what's you're comfortable with, but also from the standpoint of, is this going to make people think what you're doing is good or not? So like, for example, feeding sandwiches to people and, telling the police, you're going to have to drag me off this property. Yeah, sure. That's probably going to get most of the public behind you. That's a solid one. If you want to do that, if you choose to do that, again, I always use bombing the library, but like, something like that. No, that's not. It'll make everyone hate you. I'm going to hate you. Like, why would you do
Yeah.
that? Don't do that. So like, yeah. So you have to, even after you decide that you're going to resist, you then have to decide the resistance. Obviously, I've just used some extremes that no one's going to want it. No one listening to this is going to think I'm doing anyway. But like, even in the margins, there's going to be stuff that either you're not comfortable going that far, or that's actually going to backfire and make people hate you. You got a lot of stuff to consider when you're deciding what you are or are not going to comply with, and then how you're going to do it. And, we just have to, once we've chosen what we do it. And we make sure we're doing it in a way that inspires other people and makes them feel empowered to decide what they're going to do for the movement. What You Are the Power is doing is entirely legal. We've even filed for our, we got our 501c3 and or 501c4, and now we're working on a foundation that'll be a 501c3. We're IRS legal, right? Like, we are legal.
Yep.
And we're doing everything we can within, that's a way to help grow the liberty movement, and it's entirely legal. So, I mean, you don't have to become an outlaw just to help grow the liberty movement. People have to make those decisions for themselves.
I definitely 100% agree. I think the whole goal is keep it as peaceful as possible.
Yes. Yep.
And self-defense would be the only exception.
Exactly. 100%.
And that's really the goal. I will just say, I just want to see a little bit more, some more cowboys come out of the woodworks. There's room for it, and they are welcomed. We'll start wrapping up here, so I don't keep you too long.
Sure.
Within the kind of the same vein, I know you've attended, many rallies, many demonstrations, all kinds of things. There's one point that a very close friend of mine had made. I believe you know him, Sean Hickman.
Yes. I love Sean.
he has always made the point that people will have opinions about everything going on the world scale, the national scale, and everything, but yet a vast majority of those people won't even go to their city council meetings.
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend for people to start attending their city council meetings? Like any general questions they could ask, like beyond the just behave yourself and don't disrupt the meeting. What are some things that people could do like that could effectively start working towards change in their community?
Sure. So one thing I would do is encourage you to join You Are the Power, because that's the kind of stuff we do. And we encourage we organize people. So it's not just you showing up, it's a bunch of people. It's your neighbors and other fellow activists in the area showing up. So if you go to youarethepower.net, sign up. That's the kind of stuff we do. We do training on it. We help develop and organize around causes and all of that stuff. So that's our jam. That's what we do. But just generally speaking, I think the biggest thing that you can do is find something in your local area. And I feel like I'm saying the same thing we've said over and over again, but it's because it's this important. Find something, and I'm glad we're closing on this because this is an important one. You, first of all, there's two things. Number one, even before you're showing up to city council, I think it's important to be making connections in your community. And you may have already been doing this, so skip to step 2 if you have. But if you haven't, it's important. Show up to some charitable stuff. Show up if there's a park cleanup or a homeless outreach or something like that. Show up and just do some help. You don't have to be there a long time. Go for like an hour and a half, something like that, and talk with people and maybe get some of your friends or people that are in your community to come out and join you. I know sometimes when you're by yourself, it's pretty like daunting for a lot. I'm one of those weirdos that can show up and not know anyone and be okay. But most people aren't like that. So bring some friends, bring your loved ones, bring your family. If you got a partner, bring your partner, and show up and now people in your local community know who you are. You make some connections. You might find out about something you didn't know about that you might want to help with or something like that. And so you have a little bit of a network there, right? And the more you do that, the more network you have, the more trust capital you have from people, and then from there, and you might even find these things while you're talking with folks, but find something that really hits you here that your, like, say your city council or county council is doing or not doing, and that you can be pretty sure that other people are pretty upset about as well, and or agree with you on as well, and show up and talk to them. Show up, and the beauty of the city council thing is that because of how typically, I'm sure there are some that are exceptions, but everyone I know of, the way they do public comment, they don't respond. So if you're worried that like you're going to get up there, and because I had someone once say, I'm worried I'm going to get up there and say something, and then they're going to like, tell me how I was wrong or, insult me or something. I'm like, no, they don't even respond. They, or at least not right then. Like they don't go, hey, this is what I think or whatever. Pretty much you just go up and say your piece. Now someone else might get up and say the opposite, but that's rare. Usually it's you and whoever you brought that show up to these things. And go and just speak your mind. Have your talking points. Make sure you find out if there's like a time limit or anything like that, because some you can talk for as long as you want. Most of them usually have 3 to 5, maybe 10-minute limit. I was at one where it was like 90 seconds. Everyone went over anyway, but know what your limit is. Get your talking points down. Maybe even if you're not used to public speaking, maybe even practice a little what you want to say. Some people write it down. I'm not a fan of writing stuff down. I like to look people in the eye when I'm talking to them, but you know what? Maybe you want to write it down. You go up, give a really powerful speech. Some of the most powerful speeches I've ever seen were written down by people. So go down, write it down, practice it, go and just do it. You go and talk to them, and you'll find after you get over the jitters of doing it the first time and the what's going to happen and all that, you'll walk away feeling pretty empowered because, first of all, you did it. That's a big deal. And second of all, you'll often go there and say something and people you don't know are like, yeah, or you might even get cheered or clapped. I've seen it happen. I've seen a lot of videos where people show up and you can tell they're nervous and they're reading their thing and their arms shake, and they'll say it and people go, yeah, or whatever like that. And, that's a good first step. But if you want some help, if you want to not be in there alone, if you want to get some training behind it, if you want to get some help with organizing it, that's the work we do. We do the work of getting people around causes that matter in their backyards where it matters most, where you're far more likely to be affected on a day-to-day basis. Your local and regional, I say regional like your county or your borough or whatever, your localized, your local level government. Even a lot of the statewide and federal stuff that happens is enforced by local police or county police or sheriff's departments. It's there where it's happening. And you have the ability to show up and speak truth to power. And if you want to be a part of an organization that is doing that across the country, helping people to learn how to become activist leaders in their community, helping them to make connections with other like-minded and common cause groups in their community, helping connect them with a nationwide network of liberty activists who want to work together online and in person to do these types of things, and then show up and actually organize to win around these things, then I invite you to join us at You Are the Power, because that's exactly what we do. And our website is youarethepower.net. Membership is free. We'd love to have you be a part of it, and I hope to have you there. And Jacob, thank you again for having me on, man. I always love talking about this stuff. Always great to talk with you.
Right back at you. It was such a bummer when the first conversation we had got struck down by our big tech overlords. And it was overdue for us to have a conversation. And
Absolutely.
I started this show because I started seeing the attacks on free speech. And obviously within the liberty movement, we are just flooded with liberty podcasts.
Yep.
But I feel as though we need to dogpile with all of
Yes.
this. Put out so much content that they can't censor it, that it just keeps coming and coming.
Yep. Yep.
And so I thank you so much for coming back on. We'll definitely get you on again. And everyone go join You Are the Power. I'm a member myself.
Yep.
And there's a lot of great people doing a lot of great things. One thing I'll say about city councils, county commissions, all of these things, that's where actually a lot of corruption happens.
A lot.
They'll throw in bills for things they don't have the money for, and they'll pass it anyway. And the reason they do it is because nobody shows up, nobody questions, nobody pushes back.
It's the exact opposite. Like, there's this spotlight on what happens in DC or even in your state capital, and they do it anyway because they can, and who the hell is going to stop them? In your city council, they do stuff you would be shocked to find out what your city council, your county council, even if you're following it, you will show up to one of those meetings, and in a short period of time, as a matter of course, like it's not even happening, they will do some of the most corrupt stuff that you have ever seen because no one shows up. No one. Or if they do show up, they don't understand what's happening, and they're there just to say, there's a pothole in my neighborhood or whatever, and they get away with so much. And if someone who actually understands what's happening shows up and calls them on it, and has an organization like You Are the Power that brings the local media in and puts a spotlight on it, you would be shocked how quickly some of these councils back off, because they're not built for it. I've had entire councils delete their entire social media. They're not built for it. They don't know what pushback looks like. And if even a handful of people show up to a meeting and tell them what for, they're like, whoa, and they'll back off. Like you would be shocked. I mean, obviously, if you're in a city like Chicago or New York, we got an uphill battle. We're still going to fight it, but it's an uphill battle. But some of these, like, you're in a town of like 50,000 people, 10,000 people, 100,000. They have no idea what pushback looks like. They are used to doing stuff, and it's just the same 7 people in the room or whatever. A handful of people show up, it changes everything, and you can be a part of that.
So one last thing, and we'll end on this.
Sure.
I asked you first time around, but so many people didn't see that. And there's something I like to ask because it's simple, but it's interesting because everyone has a different opinion, and I love everyone's opinion on this.
Okay.
But why does liberty matter in the first place?
Liberty matters in the first place because we do best when we're most free. And I know a lot of libertarians don't like that because they're here on primarily, they're here because it's philosophically sound and it's the most moral thing. And I agree with all of that. But to me, what matters most to me is that this is how people live best. And it's not even that the libertarian utopia is how people live best. Yeah, that's true as well. But on a day-to-day basis, the more individual autonomy and respect and dignity and responsibility that a human being has, the more they thrive, the happier they are, the better educated they are, the healthier they are, the more fulfilled their life is, the more purposeful they are in the way that they live, the better of a future that their children and their children and their children have, the better their community thrives. And the more we can push the needle towards freedom and towards liberty, the better all of us will do. It's not a utopia, and it never will be, but it will be better. It will be proportionately better. There's a direct correlation between freedom and liberty and better outcomes for everyone. Real, better, purposeful, fulfilling outcomes for people. It's what drives me. The philosophy is what got me here, but the purpose and the value of what liberty brings is what drives me. It's what wakes me up in the morning, and I hope it does for you as well. And it's why You Are the Power, our first focus is help people now. Even if everyone we're working with isn't yet bought in, and we haven't gotten them on our high-minded ideas yet, if they're ready to work with us to help people, let's do it now. Let's help people right now. That is why liberty matters.
Well, that was well said. And on that note, we'll end it up here. And thank you so much, Spike, for coming on. Like I said, we'll get you on again. Hang out for a minute while we finish getting the recording in the background and everything. And everyone else, thank you so much for making it to this point in the video. If you found value in this, hit the like, subscribe, leave a comment. That helps the channel grow. That helps get this message out. These conversations are incredibly important, and I want to keep doing them for everyone. Not to mention, I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. And so make sure to go check out Spike's links. They are all in the episode description. We've got some good guests coming up, so make sure to stay tuned. I can't drop any names yet. Nothing's 100% concrete, but stay tuned. You're going to want to see them. Once again, thanks, Spike, and everyone else. Until next time, stay free, my friends.